In today's gospel, we have the long story of the raising of Lazarus, and that Mary and Martha, their brother Lazarus is ill. They send message, so not far away. Jesus and the disciples not that far away. They send message that he's sick, but Jesus doesn't come. And then finally, after he says that he's dead, he says he's coming, but it's to show the glory of God. And when we think about the glory of God, we certainly think about the fact that Jesus could have come during the time of his illness, and that would have had a certain amount of glory. We think about the times where Jesus healed somebody who was sick, and brought them not only to a spiritual, but a physical, but also a spiritual point. So there was a certain glory of God. We think about the greater, even greater glory when Jesus stops the funeral procession of the widow of Nain, whose son had just died. Stops the procession, probably shocked everybody, but stopped the procession and then gave the child back to his mother. Or the official whose daughter was at the point of death, and when they said, don't bother, she had already died, he sends them all the wailers and everybody out of the room, and then said, little girl, arise. So there was certainly a greater glory in that for somebody who had just died. But now Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. So Jesus comes and meets Martha on the road. Martha says, you know, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise. Martha says, I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. So that idea that at the end of time, that God would call those who were just to himself, and that there would be this resurrection, certainly not believed by all of the Jews, but certainly a good number of Jews believed in this idea of a final resurrection. Jesus says that that I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said, yes, Lord, I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world. So we think about the faith of Martha. In John's gospel, we don't have Peter who says, you're the Christ. Well, who do people say that I am? Peter steps up and says, you're the Christ. But then, just like Martha, who has this great statement of faith, that Peter in the synoptic gospels of Matthew and Mark and Luke has this great statement of faith, but then stumbles when Jesus says that he's going to be imprisoned and killed. And Peter says, no, that can't be, not happening, not going to happen. So just what we think about Martha is she has this great statement of faith, but again, later on in the story of this gospel, begins to stumble when Jesus says to take away the tomb. And she's like, well, wait a minute, he's going to have been there for 4 days, what are you doing? So again, the statement of faith. He then goes to Mary, and Mary, again, doesn't verbalize her faith, but in a way demonstrates her faith by staying at the feet of Jesus and asking that same question of him, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. So that statement. And so Jesus is confronted in a way and begins to weep, because it's really that kind of that unbelief, that they've gotten the right words, they've gotten the right actions, but they haven't taken it and seen it through to its logical completion. If Jesus truly is the one who is coming into the world, truly he is the Messiah, the one who is coming into the world, then even after 4 days, he should have the power over sin and death. But just like the people of coming into the promised land, when Moses sent the 12 spies into the promised land, 10 of the 12 said, oh Lord, Moses, it's just as you said, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's perfect, but the people are giants, the walls are fortified, so it cannot take it. And so the same way, really, in a way here, what we think about is that Jesus, you're Lord, you're God, but there is one thing that's even stronger than you, and that's death. The death is the final position. The death is the final situation of our life. That nothing is stronger than death. And Jesus is saying, no, even death has an enemy, and that's me, that I'm even stronger than death. And so what he does, he goes to the tomb. Again, Martha says, what are you doing? It's going to smell. He rolls away the tomb and then sends Lazarus out of the tomb and says, unbind him. The death which had been bound, he's now unbound. And so what are the things that we think about with the raising of Lazarus is not necessarily the fact that Lazarus came back to life again, because Lazarus would die. There's no 2,000-year-old Lazarus there than in Israel that everybody can go visit and everybody can say, ooh, I saw the 2,000-year-old Lazarus. Here's a photo with Lazarus, in Bethany. There is no Lazarus in Bethany. There is no 2,000-year-old man. So Lazarus will die. But what it does is that it shows that Jesus has power over sin and death, that death is not the final answer, but that God is the final answer, that God, whoever believes in him has that life, and that life that God gives us during this life sees us through into death and brings us to eternal life. Thanks, and God bless.